Hey all, so this is our second section in the factoring chapter, and this is called factoring by grouping. And we're going to use, in the next four sections, I should say, are all doing the same thing. They're all going to be factoring, but dependent on what we're presented, we'll use one technique over another one. And so you'll see we're going to have 2, 3, and 4 term problems. These ones are the 4 term problems. And dependent on the number of terms, that's going to kind of give us a direction to head in terms of how to factor it. So every time for the rest of the quarter that we see a 4 term problem, it's going to be a grouping problem. That's a guaranteed. And you might remember at the end of the last section, let me pull this up right here, we had some problems where if I can write this with parentheses, right, if I can get a common factor as a binomial, I can factor that out front. So what grouping is going to be is getting it from 4 terms to look like this so that I can use that technique to finish factoring. And that's pretty much this whole section. So looking at these first problem, what we want to do is see what we can factor out of the first 2 terms. And initially, it's going to work out great. Like the terms are going to be in the right order. By the time we get to the end of the chapter, we may have to rearrange the terms a bit. I'll show you a few examples with that, but at least these opening ones are going to be nice and friendly. Get a pen going. So what's the greatest common factor out of z cubed and z squared? So that would be z squared, because remember from the last section we can take out the smallest of the powers. So we'll bring a z squared out front, and that's going to leave us right here a z and a minus 4. And then I always like to distribute back and just kind of double check that I didn't do anything silly. So z squared times z is z cubed. Z squared times minus 4 is minus 4z squared. And my son just got home from school, so there may be a little bit of background noise here for a minute or two. Sorry about that. So these next two, we're going to do the same thing. What is the greatest common factor between those 2 terms? And since this is a plus, I'm going to write plus right there. When it's a minus, hopefully I have one of those coming up. I think I will. I guess I do. I might in the last one. If it's a minus anyhow, you would just have a minus there. So here I could take out a 7 from both of those, and then that's going to leave me z minus 4 again. And so then these match, which is what we were hoping for, and now I can factor that up front like we did at the end of the last homework. And it leaves behind z squared plus 7, and then that's factored. There are cases, and I'm not sure we'll see it this quarter, but you'll probably run into it, and you'll definitely run into it in pre-calc, where this piece might factor further. In this section it won't, because we don't know the rest of the factoring yet. That's what the next 3 sections are. But in future classes, be aware that may be able to factor further. So let's try the same thing with this one. So looking at those first 2 terms, it looks like the only thing they have in common is the y. So I'll bring the y out front, and that will leave me an x squared plus 8. Here I'm really hoping for another x squared plus 8. Looks like I can bring out a 7, and then there's the x squared, and then there's the plus 8 again. If you do this and these don't match, either it's one of the ones where you have to rearrange the order, or you've done something wrong and to go back and check. For grouping to work, these have to be the same because that is your greatest common factor. So we'll bring that out front, and that will leave behind y plus 7. Okay, so for this one, let's see. Looks like there's an x in both of those terms and a y. So we'll bring out an x and a y, and then that's going to leave me 5x, and then plus 2, that's it. And again, I always like to kind of 5x, x, y, x squared y, cool, and then 2xy, cool. And I just kind of distribute back in my head to make sure I haven't done anything wrong there. 40 and 16, my greatest common factor there would be an 8. And again, it's got to match this if this is going to work, so that kind of helps you make sure things are going well in the second round. 8 goes into 40 5 times, because 8 times 5 gets me back to 40, and 8 goes into 16 2 times. That's what we wanted to happen, is to get those matching terms. So 5x plus 2 out front, leaving behind xy plus 8. If we were in class, someone would ask, does the order that these are written matter? And the answer is no, not at all. If you think about 2 times 3 and 3 times 2, right, they both make 6. Neither one of these is better than the other. So if you happen to be working a problem, and especially in the later ones, we'll get things where we get the same stuff but in a different order, it's totally good. It's the exact same thing. Let's see, this next example, we got 54 and 9, and so it looks like I can bring out a 9. And that's going to leave me 6p, and then plus, so 9 goes into 9 one time, so we need a placeholder for that 1, so that when I distribute back, I get the 9. And then we got plus, and here it looks like q is going to be my greatest common factor. So we'll factor out a q, and I better get 6p plus 1 again, and I do. That comes out front, and we get 9 plus q. Now this next one, if you look at it, there is no greatest common factor between those terms. And this is where I was saying something may factor by this technique, but it may not be in the right order when it's presented to you. There are a lot of right orders you could do this in, or at least a few. I'm going to pick one, and it looks like I did this in the notes as well, where I get a negative, because I think I realized none of my examples had a negative in it. And so I want to show you just how that would be slightly different. So I'm going to rewrite this as xy, and then I'm going to put the y's together, because both of these terms have y's. So then I went plus 7y. And then I'm going to put the 21 and the 3 together, so minus 21 and minus 3x. So now these first two terms have the y in common, so we'll factor a y out, and I'm left with x plus 7. These next two terms have a 3, but because they're both negative and I want this to be positive, sorry, now my giant dog is going to run through, I'm going to factor out a negative 3. So if I factor negative 3 out of negative 21, that leaves me a positive 7. So notice that sign change, and that's why I wanted to make sure I got at least one of these with a negative sign. And this is where you can distribute back and make sure you're not making anything up. So that's negative 3 times 7 gets us negative 21. If I factor negative 3 out of negative 3x, I would have a plus x. So again, notice the sign change, because I'm factoring that out front. Now x plus 7 and 7 plus x are the exact same thing. If we thought of 2 plus 3, does it equal 3 plus 2? Absolutely, those are both making 5, and so that's saying the order for addition and subtraction doesn't matter, as long as you maintain the signs. So x goes here, oops, with a plus there, and 7. And now those look the same. I'll take it out front. I feel like I should clarify that as long as you maintain the signs. So what I just said was the order of addition and subtraction doesn't matter. So if I have 7 minus 3, as long as I say negative 3 plus 7, so notice I'm maintaining the signs. Not that 3 minus 7 is the same thing, so you have to keep the sign on that. Then the order doesn't matter, just so no one gets misled by what I said there. And so yeah, that wraps up that one. So you just have to be a little bit clever on how you rearrange this so that you can get two things together that will factor. And this is a case where you might get this answer first because of the order you chose. Again, totally good. This last problem, we got 9 and 8, and there's nothing that is common there. And so I looked at it, and I kind of liked the 9 and the 18 together. That just sort of felt like a good road to go down. And that one made it pretty easy. 9 is to 18, so I probably want to go 4 is to 8, because that's going to get me stuff in the right order, and then I won't have to rewrite it. So you can kind of see this is going to be a 1 and a 2, a 1 and a 2. So that's a good way to kind of key in. And then just finishing this out, these first couple terms, we're going to take a 9x, and that's going to leave us an x and a y. And then over here, that'll be a plus 2. And from those ones, it looks like all I can do is a 4. So x and a y, and again, plus 2. There's our common factor. So xy plus 2 and 9x plus 4. And so again, just to wrap up, anytime for the rest of the quarter that you have to factor something and you see 4 terms, it will be a grouping problem, and that's going to be the method you're going to want to use.